Greetings and welcome back to the show. This is the Presidential Speculatainment Podcast. And on this broadcast, we will be discussing Hillary. Hillary Rodham Clinton, everybody. She is making headlines. Or to be more precise, she recently made headlines. And so that brings us here on the show. I'm not going to say that this is my favorite story to be reporting on. There is an element to the Hillary 2016 story that does not sit well with me. It's sort of like reading, let's say, the Ebola 2015, or was that 2014, story. You know, it's just one of those growths and spreads, you might say, in sort of medical terms, that happens in the world we live in today. Needless to say, I'm going to give her a chance, okay? I believe anybody 35 or older with the proper qualifications deserves a chance to become our next president here in the USA. And I will not be discriminating against Hillary just based on that we already know so much about her, that we've seen her in an executive position, and that her intentions have been known for nearly a lifetime. Nonetheless, I will report to you now about the speech that Hillary Clinton gave over at the Roosevelt Park in New York City, her old state of which she was the senator. So she gave a speech, and it was about 45 minutes long, followed by some applause. Bill Clinton came out, and Chelsea's husband, and so Bill was wearing a bright red shirt to match with Hillary's royal blue pantsuit that she was wearing. And it was right on the nose, the outfits. And the speech was quite simple. And actually, what it reminded me of was, you remember those assemblies back in grade school? You know, in the elementary schedule, it's very exciting when there's an assembly because you get to get out of class. And all the different classes line up in the hallway. And you get to report down to the auditorium. That's what it felt like to me. Everyone gets corralled into the auditorium, and then there's a motivational speaker. And Hillary was that motivational speaker. And I think that was the job that she felt that she had to do. And that was the tone of the speech. I think she tried to make the audience feel good about electing her, potentially, you know. And so there was a good amount of that. Let's see. She said things like, America can't succeed unless you succeed. And stuff like that, you know. Stuff they tell you when you're, you know, thinking about applying to colleges and stuff. Very high school counselor-ish. And I think she's going to be keeping the sort of intellectual standard, you know, fairly minimal in this campaign. So there's not that much for me to report on in terms of substance and what she was saying. She did say early in the speech, she said, where is it? In the coming weeks, I'll announce specific policies. So if you want to take anything away, take that away, okay? If you missed the speech, don't watch it, okay? Nothing big was revealed. You're not going to really get any big insight on what a Hillary administration might do. It was more broad, sweeping overtones, innuendo, kind of cliche one-liners to make you feel good. So I guess we can expect some specific policies to be announced. Just like at this point, in mid-June 2015, it has now been about 2 months since Hillary announced her campaign thing starting, whatever that online video was, Ready for Hillary. And so I guess that was sort of a promise, like, all right, in the coming weeks, I'll be doing some campaigning, right? So 2 months later, we finally get a speech. Don't hold your breath for the policies to be getting released all that soon. She did say a few things that I'll note here. First of all, she kind of brought up Bill. Bill is the elephant in the room for Hillary Clinton, right? Because in American politics, we are interested in the closet skeletons and whatever scandals there are of the past. And so surely all those people in the crowd wearing sunglasses were wondering, Hillary, do you forgive Bill? Are you guys sleeping in the same bed? And just kind of wondering how she's holding up emotionally 15 years later after the fallacious scandal emerged from beneath the Oval Office desk. And she did address it somewhat, but it was a little awkward, I thought, because she basically only brought up Bill in the context of Bill plus Obama. And she gave them some kind of combination compliments where she painted them both with the same brush, complimented them, kind of lumped them together. So it came off a little odd to me, and certainly a bit weird if you're familiar with sort of office conduct, to be mixing your professional and personal relationships in that way. I'm not sure you would see that at a company, end of the year type gathering. But in any case, she did address Bill, and he gave her a nice hug, after the speech, and he played the part. Definitely played the part. So if you thought you were finished looking at his face, you are not. He will be appearing on many televisions to lobby for the wife that wasn't worth staying loyal to for him, but nonetheless, maybe he's making it up to her now. So she had a few contradictions that I'll point out in her speech. She says Republicans borrowed money to pay for 2 wars. Well, Hillary Clinton voted for the Iraq War. So she kind of implicates herself, right, with that criticism. But I mean, she didn't mark that with a footnote in her speech, or happen to mention that, although she did last month in May. She made a statement to the press that her decision on Iraq was a mistake. And she's got a handful of mistakes that have been talked about in the public. And Hillary addressed that later in the speech when she said, "I've made my fair share of mistakes." And, well, that's certainly true. And I guess the Iraq support can fall into that category. And, some voters are going to be willing to overlook that. After all, a strongly made promise is sometimes better than looking at somebody's past actions and decisions and what they actually did in the heat of the conflict. I mean, if they're standing here right now, right here in front of me and saying, by golly, I promise with every ounce of my being that I won't do that again. I'm going to be a good person from now on. Hey, that's pretty powerful, folks. And you can't deny the power of a very strongly made promise, such as, she essentially said, I've made plenty of mistakes, but one thing's for sure, there's one thing that I'm not a quitter. So I will give her that. She is damn persistent, that Hillary. Okay, another slight contradiction in Hillary Clinton's speech was when she said, we've got to do something to stop the secret, unaccountable flow of money in elections. And she went on to say that she would support a constitutional amendment to overturn Citizens United, which was the Supreme Court decision in 2010 that allows for basically unlimited donations to be made in elections. So, I mean, the chance of that constitutional amendment actually happening is quite low. We haven't had a constitutional amendment in I don't know how many decades. But in any case, I found that a bit ironic because of the Clinton Foundation that has been collecting millions upon millions, if not tens of millions, since Hillary's husband left office. And this is during the tenure as well of Hillary Clinton as Secretary of State. So, speaking of secret, unaccountable flow of money in elections, I would ask Hillary, is any of that money that was collected from the Clinton Foundation, is any of that going to be used in your election? To which perhaps she would answer, well, yes, it is going to be used, but, if I would only support the constitutional amendment so that nobody could have that kind of cash. But as long as everybody gets secret, unaccountable cash, well, I'm going to use mine. I mean, you have to play the game. And that is a part of Hillary's essence, is that she knows how to play the game of politics. And in fact, she is reinventing the game of politics. And on that note, moving on from contradictions to phrases that confused me. And really, I think that these are phrases that are only confusing if you really think about the meaning of them. If you're just listening and just wearing sunglasses and clapping to Hillary's speech, all hopped up on espresso, and, you're trying to, make up after a fight with your girlfriend. I don't know what these supporters were thinking, but I think when she said some of these phrases, if you didn't think about it, it sounded good. But I wasn't listening in that way. I was actually trying to figure out what she meant. And you know what, folks? I was just scratching my head because she said a few things. She said something like, talking about how people need to get raises. She said she's been talking to business leaders around the country, and they want higher pay for employees. They want that. Well, Hillary, if that's what they want, they're the business leaders. Why don't they just give people higher wages? All right, so I know you're saying that they support your initiative, whatever that initiative is. We don't get any specific policies, but if in fact they do support your idea for higher wages, why don't they just support higher wages in their company's payroll? Right? They're the business leaders. So she glanced over that one. She said, talking about what her foreign policy would be like, how much of a war hawk versus a dove she would be. She said, rather than addressing, number of troops, number of bases, boots on the ground, none of that stuff was mentioned. But she did say, let's shape global events. Don't let them shape us. All right, folks. So there you have it. Hillary's foreign policy has to do with the shaping of things, right? So I think the more I thought about it, the more that phrase lost all meaning. Another thing she said was about college debt. Obviously, a lot of these prospective voters are sitting on a big pile of student debt, which is actually it's this new kind of third rail in politics, and it's a big problem, people, and in our culture, and in people that are 40 years or younger, especially. It's kind of like another elephant in the room. If you're like on a first date and you're just sitting there, and rather than saying like, oh yeah, I used to be a stripper, or I used to be a drug dealer, whatever it is, the new skeleton in the closet is oh God, I owe the Department of Education $85,000. But please take me out to the movies next week, if you're free. So it's this big problem, and Hillary knows that a lot of these voters, that's one of their number one issues. And one thing that we're going to revisit is that these elections, presidential elections, are almost always decided primarily on the economy. Because what do Americans want? They want their standard of living to increase, I think, more than any other issue. People know what's best for themselves. And when you got a big pile of student debt, I believe the national average upon graduating with a bachelor's degree is from $20,000 to $30,000. A lot of people are graduating with a lot more than that, with, let's say, a master degree in philosophy. So it's a big problem, and some of these voters are worried. So Hillary says, to address that, to get back to our nonsensical statements, she says, blah, 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 there's crushing student debt. Let's make college affordable and available to all, and lift the crushing burden of student debt. Okay, well, that sounds good. But again, if I think about that a little bit, the last part sounds good. Lift the crushing burden of student debt. That actually sounds really good. So Hillary, how are you going to lift it? Are we talking about debt forgiveness? Going to write it off? And then do the schools still get paid? So in that case, are the losses going to be socialized, like kind of like a taxpayer bailout of, kind of like the TARP bailout, but instead for, students? I mean, I'm not a huge fan of bailouts, but I mean, that bailing out the students sounds, a little less evil than bailing out the banks. But I'm not sure if Hillary would be down for helping out the students like the banks got helped out, though. I mean, so what does lifting the burden mean? I mean, are we talking smaller monthly payments? can you work it off by going to one of Hillary's fun camps? So she doesn't describe what that means. And then the part where she says make college affordable and available. Well, why does student debt exist in the first place? It has to do with either one of those things, affordability or availability. As credit has been expanded and the easier that it's gotten to borrow federal money to go to college, that has driven up the tuition price. The more people that have borrowed money to pay for that tuition, then the higher that price goes. So if you just make college more available, are you doing that with just more loans available, lower interest rates? We've seen what happens to the prices in a given market when the interest rates get pressed down vis-a-vis the housing market in the 2000s. So are we just making it more available? And then if it's just going to be more affordable, then how do you do that? How do you just lower tuitions without waving a magic wand? And in fact, that could be her plan. So again, we're going to give her the benefit of the doubt on that one. I didn't see a wand emerge from that blue sleeve, but maybe she's got one. Maybe she's going to whip the old wand out. It wouldn't be the first time that Clinton's done it. Okay, moving on now to talking about lower and middle class. And in just a moment, I'm going to give you the small substance that she did offer in her speech, which was talking about these policies of giving some more kind of goodies to the working ordinary Americans. But she kind of commented on that, on to kind of address her naysayers, which might say well, why should we just create more welfare to help out the lower classes? Well, why should we, just give people free stuff or et cetera? Because that's what her critics are going to say, right? And she said this. She said she was talking about an example of a hard-working gal here in America, and she told her little story, and she said this. She said, she doesn't expect anything to come easy, but she did ask me, what more can be done so it isn't quite so hard for families like hers? And then Hillary says, I want to be her champion and your champion. So again, reminiscent of the motivational speaker at the elementary school auditorium assembly. But what does that even mean? What does that even mean? She doesn't expect anything to come easy, but she did ask me what more could be done so it isn't quite so hard for families like hers. It's nonsense, people. That's nonsense. It's either a distinction without a difference, or it's a very carefully worded paragraph. Maybe her speechwriter spent several hours on that because it sounds good. And I think that's all that matters, I think. But my intelligence was personally insulted. And, it's a lot of word trickery kind of a thing. So the last nonsensical thing that she said was, although this could even go in another category, but she said, we need to... when she's president, she's going to make sure that companies stop investing in the quick buck and focus on long-term investments. Okay? So, first of all, Hillary, that's not even your job as president. I'm sorry to tell you, but that's actually going to be out of your hands. And you're going to need to look over to your Fed chairwoman of the Federal Reserve Bank, New York. That would be Janet Yellen. And she's actually the one that handles that. So, Hillary, you're out of your element here. Although she did kind of tip her hat to old Janet Yellen, which we are going to have to do an episode on her. Fascinating woman. But Hillary said she would like to start a brand new, just create out of thin air a new infrastructure bank and issue bonds to back to her idea of long-term investment. So so it's actually ironic. Her idea of making long-term investments, it necessarily calls for the creation of quick bucks. Because when she says, I want to create an infrastructure bank and issue bonds, that just means creating a new bank into existence, and then people will buy bonds from the bank, and then the bank will pay it back with what? Exactly. So I'll tell you with what? With some quick bucks or some credit that is just created like by the hand of God, except it'll be by the hand of Hillary. So maybe that's it. Maybe she's tired of Janet Yellen over at the FOMC having all the power to create money, and Hillary wants to create some of her own money to spend on infrastructure. So actually, we might have gotten a sort of a revealing peek into Hillary's idea bank, literally. Okay, so she did, like I said, mention some goodies for the voters. Free preschool, which is the next, I guess, area of expansion for the government, federal government, right? So free preschool, and that's fine. Like that's definitely something that voters want, especially as people work more jobs and longer hours, as the economy gets lousier. But speaking of lousy, is that really who you want to be influencing your children at their most formative years? Some federal agents who are looking after your kids. There's a reason why grandma is a great candidate to watch the kids. Right? Because she spoils them, gives them cookies. She doesn't give them Michelle Obama broccoli and force them to learn the Pledge of Allegiance. Right? So I really, my heart goes out and I sympathize with people who have to find a way to have their kids looked after. But it sounds a little too good to be true, right? And how are they gonna afford that, and how are they gonna organize it? And then what happens when two kids get in a fight? Out on the playground, they start fighting over a toy. Is one of them going to get sent off to Guantanamo? That could be a hairy situation. So I'm just not sure that I've got faith in Hillary's plan to do that. She also said every employee should have federally mandated paid time off, sick and family leave, and great. Again, she's opening the goodie bag for her potential voters, and it's a tactic that has worked time and time again, especially on the Democrat side or the modern sort of liberalism that you see with politicians promising people goodies, stuff that costs other people money. And I thought it was fitting because she announced at the park of Franklin Delano Roosevelt, and Roosevelt was famous in the 1930s for passing a whole bunch of regulations on the workplace, some of which you are still very familiar with today. Have you heard of the 40-hour week, of the 8-hour workday, and so many other elements of our modern life here in America that just bind you into that working man or woman's straitjacket of earning an honest living? Because there's no two ways to do it, folks. There is one way. and that's why you're at the office 5 days a week. That's why you get 5 days off a year. That's why, you have blah, 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 blah. Forget about flexibility and the kind of compensation package you might get, because Hillary thinks it's a one-size-fits-all thing. Now, don't get me wrong. It sounds good. It would be nice. I don't know how it would be paid for. And I don't know how many less jobs would be offered if it cost companies X amount more to offer those jobs. But on the surface, sounded pretty good. So, which was overall my review of Hillary's speech. The last thing that I'll comment on was I think she did say something that was, in fact, revealing. And I think this will spell out the tone of this whole campaign for her, which she talked about her mother. And her mother lived the life of hard knocks, from the sounds of it. She was abandoned by her parents at age 14. Says Hillary Clinton's mother. And I thought, my gosh, that's a real story right there. That is actually a touching story that you can really kind of think about for a moment and say, wow, there actually is a human side to Hillary, that she's not just a completely, calculating political animal. And in fact, though, the irony is that that's sort of it. That is the window into the human side of Hillary, is she got a mother like that who grew up on hard knocks. I'll bet you that her ma taught her, how to lick 'em and how to go through a scrap and come out on the other side the winner. Like, that's the whole point, is her mother grew up like that, and she was like the perfect teacher to teach Hillary how to be basically, the ultimate political animal, I guess. And so I thought that was sweet. And, I think Hillary's mom did a hell of a job. A hell of a job. And, Hillary wrapped it up. She played both the age and the gender card. So she kind of knocked two birds with one stone out of the sky there. And she said, I may not be the youngest candidate out there, but I will be the youngest woman president out there. And all these candidates always speak in the present, or the future fixed terminology, like, when I am president, I will be doing this after my scheduled golf. Like they're so confident that they're just assuming they will be president. So, it was her card to play. She would have been a fool to not play it. And she got a big, big cheer after that. And that kind of closed the speech, not before she said, God bless America, because she was definitely smart enough to include that. So that's all I got on Hillary. We should be expecting more, just, I think, dumbed down rhetoric from her. And, I just find it a little bit insulting to the intelligence of Americans to include some of the stuff that's either a contradiction or just makes no sense. So it's either that, or maybe I have a little bit of learning to do about just how gullible we are as Americans. But I'd like to have a little more faith in the voting public, to not just vote for Hillary because she's a woman or an old woman, as she alluded to, but to really look at her as a person, because, that other surface stuff, to me personally, that's not what I would use to decide my vote. Is sure, I mean, making history, it would be an added plus. I thought it was a pleasant moment when the first African American president was elected. Sure, that was a nice moment and everything. But it's not. It's icing on the cake, right? You gotta have the cake. You can't just dig into a bowl of icing with a spoon. But her speech was as sweet. So, that about wraps up, hopefully what will be a low point in 2015 election politics. Hillary's first big speech. And please, Hillary, step it up a notch, all right? Maybe do a couple press interviews. Maybe go out and meet some voters. Put yourself out there. Really let us test you, the public. Because this whole high school auditorium assembly type presentation, it's too easy, okay? Don't let us think you're getting senile in your old age here. So, I know you're mean. I know you're one of the scrappiest scrappers out there. And so, come on, let's see some hard licks, Hillary. All right, until next time, mahalo.